Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Let's get going this morning. I invite you to rise in the ways that we do, and let's sing together. The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth of our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. Answering the call of love. Good morning, everyone. Glad that you are joining us. We welcome both the folks that are here in the sanctuary, but also those that are joining us on live stream. I'm the Reverend Doug Wadkins. I'm the interim senior minister. We offer a very special welcome to our visitors, both here and online. If you are online, we invite you to take a moment to click on the banner that says Welcome Visitors, and that will take you to a space that gives you a lot of information about our congregation. You can also, while you're there, sign our virtual guest book, and we will send you our newsletter, The Contact, so you can know more about us, as well as links to be part of any of our Zoom meetings. If you are here, we hope that you will also go to our welcome corner outside in the coffee hour so that you can also register to get The Contact and find out more about the congregation. We definitely welcome everyone to join us for coffee hour out in the courtyard after the service. We have several announcements today. The Church and Arts Council is pleased to welcome you back into the Lexile Wing Gallery for today's reception from artist Rebecca Quigley and her exhibit of fiber artwork entitled Alien Landscapes and Inner Visions. Please stop by the gallery after the service to meet Rebecca, welcome her, and see her exhibit. The reception is being held today until 1 o'clock, and the exhibit will be on view until April 14th. We remind you that at the very beginning of April 1st and 2nd, we will be part of many organizations that is sponsoring the Sarasota Conference on Spirituality, Community, and Social Change. This will be held at First Congregational Church, but we have been a big part of making this happen. It'll be an opportunity for us to meet with people from all over this area to think about the future of how we do work together around social change. I hope that you will register to be a part of it. I'm looking forward to being a part of it. And on Sunday, we will have one of the two main presenters, the Reverend Dr. Shively Smith, who is a professor at Boston University, in our pulpit here. And Shively is an amazing preacher, an incredible energy powerhouse. And so we're very lucky to have her with us on Sunday, and we look forward to that. We remind you that next week we will have our congregational meeting. It will be at 2 o'clock on Zoom, and it is important that you register because it's online so that we know about whether we have quorum, etc. You can register very easily by, while you're here today, stopping by the office before you leave, and we'll make sure that we sign you up. So please do that. And finally, before our prelude, we are in the midst of preparing for our auction, which is an amazing event. It takes a lot of work and a lot of teamwork. So I'd like to invite David Cowell to come forward and tell us a little bit about the upcoming auction. Welcome, David.
Well, my name is Dave Cowell, and I've been a member of this church for 10 years. And I'm going to remove my mask so maybe some of you recognize the face of an introvert that makes Roger Fritz look like an extrovert. As an introvert, public speaking has sometimes been a difficult thing to do. Now, you would never guess what my profession was. I was a high school principal. So I learned to overcome the fear of public speaking, but I have taken a 15-year hiatus from that. Sometimes an important event can draw me out of the shadows, and this auction is just such an event. Most of you have attended one of the past auctions, and many of you have contributed to them. The auction itself is a great time. After the service, there's lunch provided, then at designated times, 3 rooms of auction items are opened, and a spirited frenzy of bidding begins. For you extroverts. For you introverts, we slither along the side of the room and furtively put down a bid and then run back to our hiding places. Each room is open for 45 minutes, I think. When they close, the bidding sheets are gathered up and reviewed in the headquarters. For some tangible items, the transactions that are completed that day will be available after 45 minutes or an hour. For most items, the winning bidders will be notified next week and payment will be arranged. Okay. There we go. All right. So what do we need from you to make it all happen? First, we are in need of donations. There are some ideas up here on the screen. We have had wonderful vacation rentals or a room in your home or anything like that, even hotels sometimes. Parties at your house or at other places, international meals, guided birding and nature outings. The list is endless, and that's a list, and you don't want me to read it, I'm pretty sure. But they are available out at the donations table out in the main foyer. Almost anything is good. I'm going for a golf course, 2 tickets to our golf course up at IMG this year. We have done meals, we have done all sorts of things, and it's a lot of fun. Another really idea that Karen had asked me to mention today is a donation of a gift certificate to a restaurant or a pub or a dry cleaner or a florist or a golf course. If they know your name at a local establishment, they will most likely furnish you with some sort of gift certificate because of your loyalty. To sum it up, the auction works for you and because of you. It's both a time to give and a time to get. You give from your heart, and you get fellowship, a great meal, and some really nice auction prizes. Now, I think our slides say it's the most fun you'll have all year, and I hope that's not the case. You're living my kind of life if that's the most fun. But it is a lot of fun, and I hope it ranks up there with your most fun you have all year. I look forward to seeing you right after this service. Right out those doors, you're going to run into our ticket sales tables. Tickets are $10 a person, $20 for a couple or family. And seeing your smiling faces is also something I want to see on April 10th. So in summary, please donate, participate, volunteer. They have a table outside. And most of all, enjoy the Serendipity auction. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now, as we move further into worship, may our prelude give us an opportunity to transition into our time together. It is a part of our tradition to begin our worship service with the lighting of a chalice. And our words today are taken from Unitarian minister Suzelle Lynch. Each time we light the chalice, we renew our commitment to our Unitarian Universalist faith. With the spark of a match, we make it new again, as fresh and surprising as the first day that we encountered this spiritual community and realized we were home. We light this chalice for the renewal of our faith. And now, a time for all ages.
You can see them right there. So welcome, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Awesome. Today we're going to learn about our UU principles, but first we need to learn about the very beginning, which is the covenant. So here it is. In the beginning. There's lots of traditions about from different religions and different cultures about what happened in the beginning. But today we're going to focus on our Judeo-Christian story because our faith, Unitarian Universalism, came from that tradition. So, and like in many long-term relationships between people, you start with a covenant. So I've asked Nora here to help us remind you what a covenant is. So Nora, do you know what a covenant is?
No.
That's okay, because most people don't know what a covenant is. A covenant is a promise. It's really a promise between people. So, do you remember when we had our class the other day and we talked about promises? What was the symbol for a promise? Yes, pinkies. Not this one. That's not the promise. Pinky promise. That's okay. Okay, so do me a pinky promise. All right, go sit down there and have a good time. All right. Turn that off so we don't have any feedback here. That's the most important thing here. So here we go. In the beginning, God made a pinky promise with Adam and Eve. So God told Adam and Eve, and I'm paraphrasing here because I was not there when these words were said. He said, okay, here's the deal. You can live in this beautiful place forever and ever, and we'll be cool so long as you don't eat from that tree. Well, of course, that tree held all the knowledge of good and evil, and Adam and Eve, like most people, don't like to be told what to do. And because God had given them the ability to reason and to think, they wondered, I wonder why God said not to eat from that tree. Well, and as we all know, curiosity got the better of them. God got super mad and kicked them out of Eden to live in a world that was a bit harsher. So, as we learned during our RE lesson, breaking a promise also breaks trust, the trust that we have in each other. Promises are powerful things and should be treated with care and respect. Consider the Ark of the Covenant, which reportedly contains God's old covenant to the Israelite people, including the Ten Commandments and God's laws for both religious and social life. It said that it held the power to defeat Israel's enemies, as many of us saw in Raiders of the Lost Ark movies. So God has been making covenants with people throughout the ages, but people have been making covenants with each other, like marriage vows and child dedications and HOA covenants. We all love those. So, what about Unitarian Universalism? Well, we are a covenantal faith, and we often use covenants when we gather in organized groups like chalice groups or even in our religious education classes. These covenants are agreed upon ways in which we agree to interact and honor each other. So, like not talking over each other and no side conversations when people are speaking to the group. Our church also has a covenant as part of our bylaws. And note that the covenant is in the beginning. And all of our UU congregations in the United States also covenant with each other. A UU leader defined covenant as the silk that joins UU congregations, communities, and individuals together in a web of interconnection. Sounds like butterflies to me, and I'm really into butterflies right now. So, what is our UU covenant? Well, it is at the very beginning of our 7 principles. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote. Well, that is the lead into our 7 stated principles, and which are the core of our agreement with each other and our world at large. So let us all reaffirm our covenant with each other as we learn more about our principles, how we got here, and where we're going. So let us now sing our hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? After which our younger UUs are invited to leave with me to go to the West Wing for our lesson. Thank you. As we move towards the core of the service, we come to a time of centering. I'll invite you, after I do a brief reading, to spend a few moments in quiet, and then let's join together in singing Spirit of Life. Our reading is taken from a Unitarian from our far past, William Ellery Channing. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers, which calls no one master, which does not contend itself with a passive or hereditary faith, which opens itself to light whensoever it may come, which receives new truth as an angel from heaven. Here ends the reading. Will you join me for a few moments in quiet, and then together, as you remain seated, let's sing Spirit of Life.
As we move into our offering, we are also reminded that we are still in the midst of our stewardship campaign, an opportunity for everyone to think about how to be of best support for this congregation as we move into the future. I'd like to invite one of our congregants, Indira Stevens, to come and share a little bit about why she decided to pledge this year and have us think a little bit about what it is that we would like to do. Welcome, Indira, and thank you for saying yes to doing this.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me good? Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Indira Nubia Allen Stevens. I became a member of this congregation in 2020 and have loved every minute of it. My dad actually introduced our family to the Unitarian Church, or way of life. And for those of you who don't know, my parents are Richard and Yolanda Stevens. It took me a while to come around to it, but seeing all the things that the church did and needing to be surrounded by those who have maintained and uplifted my faith in humanity made me want to join. This church has become a part of my family and has made me feel safe, welcome, and wholly accepted. Thank you. And that's why I chose to pledge. This is my first time pledging, but I am happy knowing that the money I contributed will be put to good use. And a confirmation of that for me was when my dad and I went to the backpack program and saw the new biodegradable bags that the church had purchased for the recipients. I love being a part of an organization that can and will create positive changes in the world that we live in. And our pledges help make the great work that we do possible. So thank you, everyone, for all that you do.
Thank you, Indira. So now, as the offering is given and received, may we each find within us that generous place and offer it to the world. So last week, Catherine Bonner did an amazing job of talking about our legacy of social justice, and in particular, refreshing our memory about the proposed eighth principle and why it was important. And she did a wonderful job of talking about her own journey into thinking about that principle. But in the conversation over the last few months, I realized that there are a lot of things we do and don't know about the principles, apparently, that I think are important for a lot of different reasons. And so for a few minutes, I want to explore a little bit with you about why we have them and what deeper purpose they serve within our tradition. So in 1961, a new faith was formed. It wasn't totally new because the American Unitarian Association and the Unitarian Universalist Association and the Universalist Church of America had been around for a long time. But when they merged in 1961, there were some important things that needed to happen. And one of the things that they needed to do was to explore what it was that they believed this new combined tradition. Because even though the two of them, the two traditions had thought about this for a long time, there were still many things about them that were distinct. And so they came up with what was the very first version of the principles and purposes. And that first version looks something like this. Hopefully you will be able to see what that is. So I invite you to look on the back of your order of service. And so the principles that you see there are our current set of principles. And they certainly look one way. But if you could see what was up there, you would know that some of the things that it puts down is the idea of words like to cherish and spread the universal truths taught by great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. So, very distinctively different from our own tradition here. And so as we explore those various things together, obviously we've already been on a bit of a journey. In 1961, the language that they used served them well for that time, but the problem is that eventually it was clear that we were on a journey to somewhere else after our merger. And so we began a process of rethinking that original language, but more importantly, the ideals behind that language. And so in 1984, we sat down in the General Assembly and did a very first approach of the new set of principles that also included a set of sources that made clearer what we would draw from for our wisdom tradition. And there was a lot of conversation, and then it came back yet again the next year before, in 1985, we approved the current set of principles that we have now. So it is really important in many ways that we think about that journey. And one of the things that they did very differently in the second iteration of the principles is that they spent a lot of time between 1984 and 1985 going out to congregations and inviting them to be in deeper conversation about the principles. Now, often when I share the principles in a newcomer class, there are usually one of two reactions. There's usually either the reaction of, these are amazing, I love these are what I believed my entire life, and I feel like it just is another thing that tells me that I've come home. The second reaction is that many people often say, well, what organization wouldn't agree with most of these statements? What is distinctive about Unitarian Universalism? So there is a little bit of tension in some ways in our history about how well the particular set of language that we use distinguishes us. And so the conversation has continued about what it is that the principles and purposes intend for us to do. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this was the idea of the different ways that the principles address how we understand our relationship with ourselves, within our community, and to the world. So I invite you to look at, again, at the 7 principles that are on the back. Now, what has been explained is that if you look at the 2 outer principles, the first and the 7th principle, the inherent worth and dignity and the interconnected web of existence of which we are a part, these would be understood as our largest theological ideals. And so we begin and end with the sort of big picture that shapes how we understand who we are. And then if you move in one level to the 2nd and the 6th principle, well, this understands the way that we will be in the world. So it begins to talk about what we believe is essential in how we engage the world around us. And then if you go inward to the next 2 after that, it describes what it is that we believe is essential as a community as we work together. And then finally, in the very center of it all, is the understanding of, as individuals, what are we called to do in our own journey through faith. So we don't actually know for sure if that was the original intention, but amazing that somehow in the way that it came together, there is more that we can take from that. But the thing is, the reason that I want to talk a little more about this with you is that the principles point to a couple of things that go much deeper than just the words themselves and really speak very powerfully to why it is that we spent so much time, first in 1961 and then in 1984, in exploring them. And that's because there are at least 2 things that the principles do that I think are absolutely essential to who we are. First of all, they are part of a covenant. They appear in the 2nd article, which is the covenant about how congregations will treat one another and be in relationship with each other. It's part of the reason that Catherine, for the last 2 weeks, has talked quite a bit about the idea of covenant. We are people of a covenant. We do not make rigid rules with each other. We carefully explore how it is that we want to be in relationship with each other, how we want to, in some way, offer respect to each other, how we want to hold each other accountable, how we want to show our affection and our regard, and most of all, just how we will act together. So one of the things that this particular document does, the principles and purposes, is that it is part of our understanding of our covenant. And because the covenant is relational, it asks something of us. It certainly asks us to think about how we will act with each other, but it also implies that to be in community is hard work. And the thing is, in 1961, when they came up with those original principles and purposes, they fought about it like crazy. And in 1984 and 1985, there was so much dissension about what ended up in the final principles and purposes. And part of the reason was that at each of those moments, in 1961, obviously, we were at a major crossroad that was taking us into a new place. Well, the same had been at work for a long time in 1984 and 85. We were beginning to identify that we had moved into a new place. And so in our tradition, those who came out of the more Christian tradition, those who came out of the more humanist tradition, and the influence of feminist ideas really came together and clashed quite a bit in thinking about the principles. And so it required a great deal of conversation and listening to each other and some compromise in how the principles that you finally see in front of you came to be our principles and purposes. And that isn't accidental. That is actually essential to who we are. Part of the reason that we come together is to learn the difficult craft of living together and being together in a way that is authentic. and that will always challenge us if we're really drawing from a deeper place in who we are. The principles and purposes actually are not meant to just sort of mellow us out. They are meant to challenge us to think very seriously about what it means to sit together week after week, but not necessarily to believe the same things. What does hold us together? What is it that gives us that true sense of community? It can't just be a gathering of like-minded people, because we've never been fully like-minded. So it pushes us into something deeper if we let it. But the other thing, and this is the most important thing, because so many folks have said something like, well, the principles and purposes are like our creed, and we just can't change it. I mean, I love those words. I say them every week. We have to keep it exactly the same because I love it so much. Well, the thing is, that is polar opposite of the understanding of the principles and purposes, and for that matter, of the trajectory of our own faith. The thing is that it is actually a part of the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association that every 15 years we take out the principles and purposes and we re-examine them intentionally and intensely. And the thing is, we're already 5 years late. It has been 20 years since we have done any of that work, any revision of the principles and purposes. But this is not just a procedural thing. It actually speaks to one of the few core things that throughout our tradition we have believed. And you can argue that there are more of them, but generally many people say there are probably something like 3 ideals that have held us together. From our Unitarian tradition, there's the idea that Jesus was human, and from that, a real emphasis that what we are about is understanding the human endeavor in terms of how we treat each other and live our lives. There's a reason why we don't spend tons of time talking about more metaphysical things, although plenty of people are interested in that. We care about the human endeavor. Number 2, we, from our Universalist side, in the belief that God is all-loving, start from a place that is not about shame and guilt, but about gratitude and a sense of generosity and why we do good in the world. We don't come at it from this fear of punishment. But the third thing, and this is where we intersect, is that we believe, if we were putting it in more formal language, that revelation is not sealed. And that is, there was never one person, one book, one moment that told us everything that we need to know about the world and truth and what it means to be faithful. That part of our job is to let the world constantly ask us to revise how we understand our own faith. And that is really hard. No matter how liberal and open-minded you are, change really gets our goat time and time again. And so when we're asked to think about how the world around us has changed us, in 1961, it caused people to fight with each other. In 1984, 85, it caused us to fight with each other. And now again, as we are looking at the 8th principle, we are fighting over the language. But the thing is, what it really is about always is that it is asking us to keep moving forward as a faith, to move into new ground that for us is scary and pushes us into a new place. That's really the reason to be working on the principles at all, because it leads us into being a living tradition. The living tradition means that, yes, we honor the past, but we're always called to push further, to push into new ideas, to think about them deeply, but most importantly, to act in a way that is consistent with our faith out in the world. And so the principles should make us uncomfortable. They're not meant to hold us in one place in time. They're meant to carry us forward, to continue to engage the world in a meaningful way. So as we think about the upcoming journey into the principles and purposes, or as you look at them as they exist today, remember that we are called in a deeper way to explore who we are as Unitarian Universalists. That we're called to think for ourselves about what it is that this next time in our lives calls us to do. We know that we're moving into a very unsettled time in the world, and it has been this way for a long time. What is our particular voice for peace and for a sense of cohesion and unity in the world? That, I believe, is why it's important for us to keep at the hard work of looking at why we exist, what our church is about now, and the principles and purposes are meant to carry us into that future with more clarity. Megan Foley wrote this: "When we believe that we are supposed to be more, even when we aren't sure what the road to it will be like, that's how we show that we are a people of faith." There is no doubt that we don't know exactly what the coming years will bring. But our job as Unitarians is to be alive enough to really move into that with an open mind, an open heart, open hands. That's what the principles and purposes have asked of us again and again, to think deeply about how we will be in the world and with each other. May that exploration bring us to a deeper sense of why we exist and what it is we are to do. I invite you to join me in our closing hymn. Hymn number 1008. Let's rise in the ways that we do as we sing "When Our Heart is in a Holy Place." As we prepare to leave today, may we also remember the rest of the story of those times in our history when we have become embattled over our principles and purposes. We moved through that, mostly got over it, and found a way to be a united community and do good work. Ultimately, for us all, may we journey through important matters faithfully, honestly, And through it all, the light of wisdom, the warmth of community, the fire of our commitment to what matters most, those will remain in our lives until we gather in this place again. Thank you for joining us this week. We look forward to seeing you next week when we'll have a special guest from the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee. See you out in coffee hour.